Welcome and thank you for joining me on this very latest episode of Unleash CX, where today we'll be discussing AI. I know it's a topic that's been spoken of in detail, but we'd like to add a bit of a twist to this. And the conversation today will be more around how we can increase the human value by leveraging AI. Now, I can't think of anybody better in the industry to help me unpack this topic. And I'm very grateful and very thankful to have Kane Simms join me. He's considered an AI and CX industry primary authority figure and thought leader, and rightly so. For me, certainly kind of the front door into the world of AI-powered customer experiences, helping business leaders and teams understand why voice, conversational AI, natural language processing technologies can revolutionize the way we live, work, and get things done. And just a few accolades. Obviously, your Kane's present across the industry, doing events, podcasts. He's considered a top 10 voice AI influencer by VoiceSpot, top 20 voice AI influencer by SoundHound, Harvard Business Review published, and has educated staggeringly over 150,000 people. I'd like to know how you work that number out, but it's certainly, as a voice, definitely industry leading, and honestly, a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining me today, Kane.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah, the number comes from the unique downloads of the podcast. Needs updating actually, because that was quite a while ago. So if you would class every unique download as somebody who has got something from it, which I hopefully think that you should have done because all the guests we've had on there have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Then yeah, we have educated in some part well in excess of 150,000 practitioners and leaders in this field.
That's incredible. And I think, and I'd like you, I'm sure the introduction I've given you doesn't really do the justice of the work that you've done over the last few years. I think it's safe to say the conversation around AI and CX has kind of really blown up in the last year or so. And I'm sure it's no accident that you're kind of leading those conversations in this industry. I'd really like to understand how you've kind of got to this stage, where your journey began to where you are now. And actually, what do you want to get out of this? What's your purpose around, as you said, educating so many people? It's incredible because it's completely on point at the moment in our industry.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. So the purpose really, the fundamental purpose of Vux World began and still is today to essentially remove negative experiences in people's lives. Fundamentally, every time you have to contact any brand about anything, whether it's on the purchase journey or the support journey, there's inevitably issues that you face. No company really is getting it 100% right at the moment, and so the mission is to eradicate all of those terrible poor experiences, make the relationships between companies and consumers better and more positive, and fundamentally give people time back in their life, because it doesn't matter what brand you are necessarily, the vast majority of brands, nobody really cares about you. Nobody really wants to contact you. Nobody really wants to call you. Nobody really wants to go and engage with you in any way, shape, or form. They want an outcome they're trying to achieve. They want a good pair of trainers so that they don't pull their ankles when they run. They want a decent credit card that doesn't overcharge them when they miss one stupid payment. They just want outcomes, basically. And it just so happens that certain companies have got themselves in a position to be able to deliver those outcomes. But I think the mistake happens is when you start to overvalue your brand and devalue the user experience and the outcomes a customer's trying to get. So really the purpose of VUX is to help businesses build better relationships with consumers so that consumers have their time back. They don't have to spend their time doing stuff that they ultimately don't want to do.
Yeah, that's the end game, isn't it? I think most as consumers, we know what the end product is that we're aiming for. How we get there, how we get that product is really kind of defined by the brand that you're engaging, whether they've really thought about me as a consumer and the experience I need to run through from start to end to get my outcome, product or service or whatever it is that we need. And I know we'll kind of explore this as the conversation develops. What I'd like to, as I said, the topic for today, what we've seen in our industries when AI initially broke into the CX space, there was this kind of fear of whether AI will eventually replace all agents. There's been loads of blogs written about, human value being diminished to an extent. And there was that initial fear. But now, as we've seen kind of AI being implemented and executed, we're seeing the benefits of how AI can help complement the service that agents offer, whether that's through being more productive, being more efficient, giving the agent a little bit more time back. And we're seeing those kind of smaller gains. The ultimate goal, as you said, is to deliver a better experience for the consumer. Like, let's not lose sight of that. I think sometimes we get too drawn into got to implement AI for the sake of implementing it because it helps the agent, but does it actually help the consumer at the end? I think we can't obviously lose sight of that. Where I'd like to kind of where I'd like to take the conversation is, I think we've kind of achieved that middle ground. How do we now drive more value? How do we drive more human value? I.e., how can an agent, for example, offer more to a consumer? Because it's perceived that AI is doing a lot of the self-service, potentially automating a bunch of stuff. So therefore, the agent has more time to do other things. Question is, what are those other things? What should they be doing? And how can we skill the agent to deliver more value? And really, as an individual, if you become more valuable, there's more money in your pocket. So I think the industry is kind of evolving. It's just I'm wondering whether we're ready now to make that shift, to drive more of the human value, because we're getting value out of the AI, and we'll continue to do that as that technology improves. We just want to get your thoughts on whether you agree, first of all, whether we're already at that stage, or do you think we're still at that middle ground?
I think the technology is almost at that stage. I would say the consumer adoption is very, very early stages of that. I think that some companies begin with agent-facing solutions or even internal-facing solutions, like automating various HR and IT processes, because that's kind of like the least risky thing you can do. You're not really going to replace anybody as such, and your goal isn't to really replace anybody. Your goal is to make IT and HR and all those kind of internal support teams operate more efficiently. If you don't start there, you'll start with your agent assist use cases. That's seen as the second least risky application, because it's hidden from the customer and it's still behind the scenes, but it's affecting the customer interaction because it's giving agents guidance and helping them do things. The productivity gains that have been seen there so far, from the studies I've seen and the brands that I've seen implement this really well, I've seen a lot of shit shows, if I can use an expletive, but the ones that are getting it right, where they're finding the most value isn't in the place where you would expect. So you would expect that by putting agent assist solutions in place, that you would essentially raise the performance of your least performing agents to a level that's kind of comparable to your best performing agents. That's kind of the dream, isn't it? Like, if you can give people tools that raises their level of performance so that everyone performs consistently, then that's ideal. But what you actually find is that the least performing agents, they're the ones who've kind of checked out anyway. They're not really invested in the company, not really invested in the job. The high performing agents, the ones that are already performing really, really well, what you notice is that when you give them AI solutions, they perform significantly better, if you could believe that. So the AI solutions, especially on the agent assist side, are already really helping organizations leverage their best agents even more effectively. And I think this is the area of AI that interests me a lot, is that we think that, we're operating at this level right now, and we want to use AI to help us manage this level where we are today. What we don't really think too much about is, what will AI enable us to do in the future that we're not even thinking about today? So that what we think is the ceiling actually isn't the ceiling. That's the glass ceiling that we can smash through to get to the next level. And that's one area where using agent assist for your internal agents, you think that your high performing agents are just the high performing and they're never going to get better because they're already good enough. But actually, they do get better using AI. And so if you want to talk about putting people, front and center, or leveraging our people more, AI will inevitably do that. And you see this also in marketing and in a lot of those kind of like admin jobs, consulting jobs and stuff like that. There was a study that was done, I forget the company that did it, but they essentially gave two sets of people tasks to do, very similar kind of tasks, marketing email tasks and consulting insight tasks and these kind of things. And they give one group of people ChatGPT and another group of people didn't have ChatGPT. And the ones that had ChatGPT leveraged and were able to create significantly better outputs and faster. And so the areas where we think AI is actually going to infiltrate and steal from, consulting, marketing, sales, customer service, the actual reality is it's actually making those people that are in those roles perform significantly better.
Yeah, and I think if you focus on the high performing agents for a second, it's a great example because they're always striving to do better. They want to get the best numbers on the board and everything else right. That's what makes them high performers. Is they'll leverage the tool to be even better because they recognize that they have this intelligent capability that allows them to deliver much better outcomes for their consumers. But I think the other kind of angle to this is by potentially giving agents more time between engagements, customer engagements, because the processing, the note taking, all of those things are now, summarized. So there's less to do there. There's more an agent can do to potentially drive a better experience for the consumer. We hear a lot around kind of empathy, for instance, depending obviously on the use case. But if the metric that you're following is average handle time, then you don't have perhaps time to deliver the kind of empathy that a consumer needs, right? Depending on that particular use case. Do you think we can use AI to perhaps unlock that type of empathy, if that's even possible? Do you think that's an angle there?
Um, I mean, the good performing agents are generally empathetic anyway, aren't they? It depends on what you're trying, what empathy will give you as far as an outcome is concerned. Does it make the
Yeah,
conversation nicer? Does it make the customer experience nicer? There's
yeah,
definitely something to it whereby a lot of your customer contact is coming from people that go into a conversation with an expectation, and they will not get the outcome that they are seeking because that's not how it works. But
mm,
what you want to do is, in those cases, you want to let them down gently. So it's, for example, if someone's complaining to obtain a, if someone's calling you to obtain a refund, but they've had the item for 6 months and it's broken, and that's
mm,
against your refund policy, then
mm,
that interaction is going to be a negative interaction if that's handled poorly, because the
yeah,
customer's calling, they're not going to get the outcome that they want. That's for sure.
mm,
But
mm,
what they can have is a pleasant enough experience that has them think about that interaction itself as being as positive as it could be, even though we didn't get the response that we needed. If
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah.
So I would definitely say that. I would definitely say that's the case. I can't remember the second point you were referring to there. There
Yeah,
was
no, I
a,
think yeah, I think there's some examples, like for instance, in recent times, where my team have been working with an organization. They've implemented AI just to kind of summarize, right? Very basic use of AI, but actually some of the benefits that they've seen is they've got conversational AI built in the front end, delivering a level of self-service. That conversation is developed, the intent behind what the consumer's asking indicates that actually this customer's pretty unhappy. There's something going on here. But being able to then kind of escalate that conversation with AI to a human, you've got an agent accepting that engagement, getting AI to summarize the intent behind that conversation, what's been discussed, what the sentiment looks like, for example. The agent is now ready to offer empathy, as you say, in this
yeah,
situation. Maybe there isn't a solution, but they kind of they lead with empathy because
yeah,
actually they're armed with enough knowledge to focus more on that because
yeah.
actually maybe there isn't a solution to this particular issue.
Yeah, so what you're saying there essentially is that through the use of more supportive technologies, agents can spend less cognitive load worrying about the mechanics of the process and technology
Exactly.
that they're using,
Yeah.
and focus more on the conversation. Yeah, that's definitely the case. I think that what you need to figure out there is, how do you then start to kind of understand the quality of those conversations. You mentioned average handle
Yeah.
time. What
Yeah.
you'll notice is that, for most companies, low average handle time is typically deemed to be pretty good.
Yeah.
But what you'll end up finding is that the very first place to start with automating some of that customer facing stuff is the low hanging fruit. It's the stuff that's relatively easy to enable self service for. But that's the stuff that brings your average handle time down. So what you'll
Yeah.
find is, when you start taking out that tier one support, you find that everything goes to tier two, which means that all of the handle times increase. And so
Yeah.
if your key KPI is average handle time, you're going to have a hard time with
Yeah.
with that, because you're going to implement AI and your average handle time is going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
So then you need to
Yeah.
start thinking about, how do we then measure the performance, not the performance of the agents, I mean the
Yeah.
performance of the business as far as it's delivering the service essentially.
Yeah.
And there's a really good company called Behavioral Signals. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but
Mm.
what they have is, they have technology that will understand your conversation style, and there's a number of different styles of conversation that people have. And what they do is when you call, they will recognize your conversational speaking style, and they will put you in touch with an agent that shares the same conversation style as you.
Right.
Now, you might think, well, what difference is that going to make? That seems pointless. But the reality is, they have a conversation score which measures things like, I don't know whether it specifically measures empathy, but it definitely measures the dynamics of the conversation, the sentiment, and the positivity that the customer has in terms of their experience. And they've been able to prove and measure that matching people's conversation styles together leads to a positive impact on the conversation. So in those conversations where someone's not going to get the outcome that they wanted because they're trying to make an insurance claim but they're not covered for that particular thing on their policy, that's a bad conversation to have. But if you can match them together with an agent that shares their speaking style, you'll find that's going to be a far more positive interaction. There's another great company called Tomato AI, and they have some technology which will essentially, at first, when I first heard about it, and I spoke to Ofer, the founder, on a podcast recently, when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, this sounds like an ethical minefield. But the use case is actually pretty sound. So what it does is, their technology in real time, speech to speech, will take the voice of an agent or a customer, whichever, and they will essentially, in the politest way possible, nullify their accent.
Yeah.
Right? So you imagine you've got a contact center in the Philippines that you've outsourced to. Whether you like it or not, there is a language and an accent barrier in some conversations where some of those callers are not really going to understand the agent. And that's going to lead to frustration. And if you're measuring the quality of the conversation, that's going to lead to a poor quality conversation. So what it will do is it will nullify the accent, use the same tone as the agent, but it will essentially turn their accent into an American accent or an English accent or whatever it might be.
Localized accent, right?
Localized accent.
You're calling from Liverpool, for example. It'll be great to speak to a fellow Scouser, right? I mean,
I don't think they're as sophisticated as specific regions at the moment. But what they're kind of finding is that that technology leads to more positive conversations because they take away the cognitive load on both sides. Because it's exactly the same as if someone calls your contact center that's based in the US, but they're calling from Argentina. You might have the same issue basically, and so it can be used both ways. So this is kind of what I'm saying in terms of utilizing the technology to remove any of that cognitive load from both parties, the consumer and the agent. If you can remove that cognitive load, you get everything out of the way, which is what technology is supposed to do. It's supposed to get out of our way. That's exactly the same as what brands are supposed to do, I think, in some cases. Get out of the customer's way, give them the problem, get it solved, and then move on. And so if you utilize it effectively, you can remove that cognitive load and make space for an effective conversation. Essentially.
I think it's a great point. There's a few companies out there that are doing exactly what you've said. I'm yet to see a well-executed solution that can deliver natural language in real time, and I think there's been issues with delays and things with but it's I get where we're going with this. We certainly, outsourcing contact centers is a massive thing. It has been for a long time, and we in recent years we've seen many organizations actually shift their contact centers outside of countries where the accent's quite strong because actually consumers are struggling with that. So you've seen contact centers in places like Jamaica and South Africa, for instance, become very popular because it's considered a very empathetic, very kind accent that people can relate to. So if you could just make everybody Jamaican, I mean, maybe that's the answer, right? It's
that's why they ended up putting a load in Sunderland and Newcastle, isn't it?
Apparently
that's why they do a lot of adverts with the Geordie accent, because apparently it makes people feel comfortable. Some people mistake me for a Geordie sometimes. I'm not a Geordie, I've got to say that.
Where are you from?
I'm from Teesside. Yeah, it's like 40 miles south of Newcastle, so you could be forgiven for thinking I'm a Geordie, but
close enough. Close enough.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So I think there's some really good examples there of how we, as you say, you're kind of taking the process, the admin away from the agent to focus on stuff that can really help humans and agents to kind of deliver a lot more value back to the consumer. I think, as you say, it's something that we're seeing organizations still kind of struggle with at the moment. Is everybody's still experimenting, right? As you said, right now we recognize the low-hanging fruit is considered how AI can impact agents on the internal side. I just kind of like to focus a little bit on the consumer end. I saw a great post you did on LinkedIn this morning around generative AI within the conversational AI space. And this is a really interesting topic for me because, we're certainly working with a lot of customers at the moment, designing conversational AI solutions, but they're all very transactional. Because actually, there are certain outcomes that we absolutely need to deliver for the consumer, and it needs to be a little bit predictive. We've got to take the customer through a journey, but we do get asked every time, can we not make this sound more natural? Can this not be more like Chat GPT, for example? I just wanted to explore that with you for a few minutes, because you talked a little, it was the 2-3 minute post, but I think you got a spot on in terms of the challenges with generative AI. Do you think we're ready to start implementing this, or do you think not just yet? Or there's certain use cases where you think this is appropriate?
I think that generative AI, right now, as it is today, is very, very useful in very narrow, specific capabilities. So summarizing a call, perfect. Creating a disposition code, perfect. Having a conversation with an end user, managing that conversation from end to end and delivering an outcome, absolute nightmare for a number of reasons. One is that the models don't understand what your business process is. And so they'll just be acting upon their world knowledge of what a typical process like this looks like. So you're going to have conversations that are happening that are completely irrelevant, collecting information that you don't need, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is that they don't have any kind of memory or what you would call state management. In a conversation, you have to understand what the context of the conversation is. So if we begin talking about how AI can empower humans, and then we get on to talking about how we can use generative AI in a customer-facing conversation, I need to understand what that previous context of the conversation was, because you might ask me another question that follows on from what we were discussing previously. And if I don't remember what we discussed previously, then the whole conversation falls apart. So there's a whole load of things that generative AI just doesn't have on its own. So the best use case for generative AI, or use cases for generative AI at the moment in a conversational AI context, is that if you've got a use case which is essentially search, right? We just want to find information. Perfect. Use retrieval augmented generation, index a bunch of your data and documents, and have that large language model vectorize the input and retrieve the information. That's a perfect use case. There's a lot of proven cases now out there in the wild where that use case is operating effectively. There's enough guardrails involved. You can, especially if you use like a small language model and you fine tune it on your data, you can definitely get some really, really good results. The difference is when you start to have conversations with customers that are action-oriented and transactional in nature. Someone wants to change their address, or they want to take out a new credit card, or they want to add someone to their policy, or they want to return an item, or they want to understand what their delivery timescales are. All of these things, there are specific rules, basically, and specific processes that businesses have to deliver on all of these use cases. So the best way to do that at the moment is you need a platform that's going to manage that process. And at every stage of that process, there are specific things that need to be accomplished in order to move on to the next stage of the process. If I want to change my address with my bank, the first thing they're going to have to do is authenticate that I am who I say that I am. The next thing they're going to want to do is they're going to need to take my postcode, confirm they've got that correct, take my address, confirm I've got that correct, etc., etc. So there's steps you have to go through. Within those steps, though, it used to be that you would have an NLU model, a natural language understanding model. You'd have to train every single one of your intents, which is everything a customer can say, on specific data, and then you would hope that that conversation that's had, the user utterance, what they say to the chatbot, would then be matched to one of these intents, and then you can progress with the conversation that way. The challenge is that language is nuanced, dialogue is different for every different person. Google in 2016 found that there was 8,000 different ways that somebody could ask Google Assistant to set an alarm, which the breadth of language is unbelievable. So large language models are really, really good at taking that breadth of language and then distilling that down to what you would call an intent. So that means you don't necessarily need to have an NLU model anymore. You just need to have what your intents are, and let the large language model's understanding of words identify the right intent. Perfect use case. It means you're always going to understand what someone says.
Exactly.
Disambiguation is another great use case because you can contextualize your responses. And so contextualized responses is great. So, for example, if someone says something like, let's think. If they say something like, if you ask, you're an airline and you ask a question, are you flying in economy? And someone says, unfortunately. right? They obviously mean yes. NLU models wouldn't deal with that. A large language model will deal with that, so you can deal with more ambiguity, let's say.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where someone says something like, "Can I add my daughter onto my insurance policy?" To understand that utterance using a traditional NLU model, you need to have an entity for daughter and any other thing that could be said. Can I add my cat? Can I add my goldfish?
Yeah.
Every single thing that could be said, you'd need to map that out beforehand. And then you would need to write hard-coded written dialogue for every single one of those responses.
Right.
What a large language model will do is it will just take what was said previously,
Yeah.
and if you don't allow people to add their cats onto your policy, if it's not daughter or son or whatever, then you can contextualize your response and say, "Well, I'm sorry, we don't understand. We don't." Rather than "Sorry, I don't understand that," the response will be, "No, in fact, actually, no, you can't add your cat to the policy, but you can add your son or your daughter if that's what you mean."
Yeah.
So you can leverage the generation part of the dialogue for contextual responses. You can
Yeah.
leverage the understanding part of the model. Sorry, you can leverage the understanding part of the model to get more accurate with your intent recognition, and then underneath that, you have a platform which will manage the workflow. So you
Yeah.
bring in the large language models and generative AI for the little bits that they're good at. You
Yeah.
don't let them run riot and run fast and loose with your whole process.
Yeah.
I know it's a
Yeah.
long-winded way of explaining, but
No,
I hope that makes sense.
it is really well explained actually, because it's as you say, it's kind of it's striking the right balance every step of the way, but it's being in control of what that journey looks like, and certainly the response. So knowing what those intents are, I think is certainly the kind of big challenge that most customers face. Obviously, we can even use Gen AI to generate a load of intents as well. So there's ways to kind of simplify so some of those things. But you're absolutely right. I think there's definitely a misconception across many organizations when they're delving into the world of chatbots, because actually the reason why you're investing in this technology is to drive specific outcomes for those consumers, right? That's how you justify the cost to invest in this technology, because all of those processes that you're implementing have costs associated with it. You mentioned the search example. That's probably an example. It's a great example, by the way. The use case is great, but what's the tangible value of delivering a search mechanism to the consumer? You're not delivering an actual outcome. So the cost to invest in something like that could be difficult to justify. But actually, if you can remove certain processes, manual processes that can be self-served through adding your daughter to a policy, as an example, we know the cost to deliver that process is X through a human versus delivering it via self-service. That's where you start to build a business case, and that's usually where we kind of start the conversations. Is actually what are those processes that are really causing you guys pain, and then that's you start there, and then you kind of evolve this, right?
That's not
yeah.
cool though. That doesn't make headlines. That's not flashy enough. That's the thing. I mean, that's the absolute right place to start. I was having a conversation last week at our Umpires conference with a German insurance company. I won't say who they are. It's been mandated to them that they use generative AI, and they have to use retrieval augmented generation, and they have to ship something in the next quarter. Now, imagine giving that a brief to a set of designers. So what they're unable to do is understand from the business perspective what are our really heavy hitting processes that have got a lot of problems in them that we could solve. What they're not able to do is go out to the users and do some research and figure out what are the real customer pain points that the customers really have. What they have to do instead is use retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially search, and build a chatbot that uses search. And what most miss out on by not thinking about the customer need, by not thinking about the business processes and the business need, what you do is you end up implementing a generative AI chatbot that treats everything like a question. And there's an example. I've used this example loads of times, and I don't mean this in any offense to the Vodafone team, who are brilliant, but the sub brand Voxy, they've got this LLM based chatbot, and when you ask it, I want to upgrade. How do I go about upgrading my contract? What you'll get is a response that says, in order to upgrade your contract, all you have to do is pay off your contract, find a new contract, and take out a new contract. Right? It's answered that as if I was asking it a question, whereas really, what's the subtext of my request there? The subtext is, I'm interested in giving you more money and extending the course of my contract because I want to renew it. So I'm actually asking you to put me into a sales journey to
yeah,
really understand what my needs are. Tell me how much I've got left to pay out for my contract. Give me a bit of a discount to incentivize me to take out a new contract. Find the phone that I want to take out and get me the right plan. Like, this isn't search-based stuff. There's search involved, but what you've missed out on is the fact that I'm talking to you about a transaction.
yeah,
And because you've used that retrieval augmented generation architecture, you've missed out on that. So that's
yeah,
the big risk, is that if you just focus on throwing AI at the problem because it's sexy and cool, you're
yeah.
going to miss out on all of that opportunity to really impact the business, you know?
Yeah, and especially for organizations that haven't got data to look at right now. They're kind of new in this game in terms of introducing certainly a chatbot into the organization. There's definitely a danger of losing out on opportunities like that, where you've got consumers who've never engaged with you digitally are now engaging. Potentially there'll be upsell opportunities, or perhaps a transactional one. You've got to find a way to understand that intent from the outset to possibly route that into a human being as quickly as possible. And I think certain organizations do this really well. I think I see this in the travel industry. It's pretty good. The second you show any signs of placing an order, you'll be encouraged, or you'll be deflected to either get somebody to ring you or whatever, right? There's proactive ways of being able to deliver that. So it's just as you just going back to your point, is you've got to really design the right solution, and really focus on actually what services that you want to be kind of delivering, and more importantly, not losing out on delivering a bad customer experience and potentially revenue if in that particular example there.
Yeah, I mean, think about every company that is. It's different if you've understood that through analyzing your customer contact or your web searches or your contact drivers, that you're taking a significant amount of time and effort to give people information that you already have internally.
Yeah.
That's validation enough to say, right, okay, let's use retrieval augmented generation. Let's pull this information forward. Let's give users direct access to it. There's a business case around that. If you're using it for shits and giggles because it's cool, then you're missing out on the actual customer need, essentially. And the most businesses, if you look at most businesses, they have terrible processes, right? The data's not in great shape. So it's not as if you've just got policy documents you can just ping into a vector database and Bob's your uncle. You'll have a significant amount of work to do to turn that content into something that's, worthy of even ingesting in the first place. You're going to have duplicates all over the place. You're going to have stuff that's not in date and out of date and stuff like that. And so, there's challenges all over the board. And I just think that if you start with analyzing your contact drivers and what your customers are actually contacting you about, finding where the big heavy hitters are, marry that with an understanding of the business process from end to end, what's working, what's not working, who's involved in it, what systems are involved in it, where's the pain points and bottlenecks. And you're not then talking about designing a chatbot. What you inevitably end up having to do is consider how you redesign that process in a way that is now fit for a conversation.
Yeah.
And in order to redesign that process, you will have to think about your data. You'll have to think about your technology and your infrastructure. You'll have to think about your business process and your policies, your people. You have to consider all of that. And that's just for finding out that one use case that's going to add you that first initial bit of value. But if you do that, rather than throwing spaghetti at the wall with, Gen AI, retrieval augmented generation, if you actually do the work to figure out what your main customer needs are and what your main business pains are, and then try and marry the two together, you will find that the validation and the business case for that writes itself. It's and then you're on the path. Then we'll start with this use case. Maybe we still have a boring IVR that says press 1 for this and press 2 for that, but then you press 3 for this, and all of a sudden you're talking to an agent who can manage from end to end the conversation. And if it does fail, you get put through to a live agent who understands exactly what you've just been talking about. I think companies have it the reverse way around. They want to start with that internal use cases, which I'm not knocking because internal use cases have value. But then they want to start
less risky as well, isn't it?
Less risky, and especially if you want to do it all internally with your own team, it's a really great place to sort of like cut your teeth. Or they want to go with agent use cases, which again is less risky because you're not having customer interactions and you've got a safe space to experiment there. And they tend to kind of veer away from that customer kind of automation. And yes, because it's tricky, and maybe because it is going to have you force yourself to consider your process and all that kind of stuff. But that's where the ultimate value is. So from my perspective, when we sort of work with any company that wants to do this stuff, we always start with the customer need. What are your contact drivers? Give us your data. Give us all your emails, all your tickets, all your phone calls. Give us everything. Let's analyze all of that, figure out what's going on. Then let's pick the top 5 heavy hitting processes. Let's figure out what the actual process looks like internally, right? Where's the bottlenecks? Where's the friction, all that kind of stuff. And then let's figure out how we re-architect and reorchestrate those processes to be able to really make a big impact on those top drivers. Then let's give the agents the tools that they need when the things go wrong, as they inevitably will. So you're starting with that customer first lens, working back to the agent lens, working back to the business, which is what you should always do. Start with the customer need, work back to the technology. But for some reason, we're in this phase now where, it's all flashy lights and AI. And so, you've got to build your own version of ChatGPT because it's cool.
And look, that's where guys like you are there to kind of make sense of this noise that organizations are trying to kind of accelerate towards, but it needs a lot of thought and planning. I think certainly what we find is working with customers out there, when you start to unpack this, it starts to expose the processes, the data, the knowledge, because actually it's now surfacing everything that's wrong with what's going on there. And I think that's where we're finding there's a lot of focus and investment in getting that bit right, get your data in order so you can really deliver the right outcomes from the outset. So I think that we're seeing that it's understood, but I think it's not realized until you start implementing this type of technology. And we're certainly seeing it. We've seen examples of knowledge base all over the place, duplications, contradictions, all of these things. And for some reason there's an expectation that why can't we get it to work out what the right answer is? It's like, it's not, there isn't a magic pill here. Like you've got to put the work in now to benefit from what the intent here is to get the right information to the right people as quickly as possible. We're seeing a lot of organizations make great progress, but there's a long way to go. I think, as you've said, we're all blinded by this two-letter acronym AI at the moment.
It's the age-old problem. If you speak to any designer or any design strategist that's got any degree of experience, and they will tell you that the biggest problem that most organizations have is that they begin with the technology. It's as simple as that. If you do the good thing about it sounds painful, and it's a lot easier. Not that it is easy, because it is difficult, because you need to get your data in shape. You need to really have organized on a technology front. But it's a lot easier to build a retrieval augmented generation chatbot than it is to go out and do user research, than it is to go out and do some channel analysis, than it is to have conversations with all of the stakeholders throughout the whole business to try and figure out how this process actually works in the first place. And then it's even more of a challenge to get them all on the same page around what the future vision for that service looks like, and how you might be able to re-architect things to make everybody's lives easier. That's a lot harder to do. But the thing is, when you start going down that road, the very first week you conduct user research and you speak to your customers about their actual experience with your brand, as soon as you start learning what their real experience is, and you start mapping that across their journey, and you're able to show stakeholders not what you think the journey is, but what their actual experience is, you can't unsee or unlearn that anymore. Now you know. And then you got to make a decision. Are we going to solve this, or are we going to keep on playing with our shiny tools? And it's a lot harder to solve the problem. Of course it is. That's why businesses like Netflix and eBay and Uber are so highly valued companies, because they've taken the time to design from the ground up something that works. And the organizations that are doing really good work as far as this kind of stuff are the ones that are leveraging AI better, because they've done the work to invest in their processes and their technology and their infrastructure. They've done all of that hard work already. Love Holidays is a great example. Technology, it sounds like a travel agent, but it's pretty much a technology company. And that's because from the beginning to end, they've focused on getting their processes in order, getting their technology in order. Now putting a front end on that is easy, So it's like you have to do the hard work, unfortunately. And one of our principles, which I've got here, I can share with you. One of our principles is to make it easy to use, at all costs, which means doing the hard work behind the scenes to make that so.
And it doesn't come easy, right? And I think, just to kind of summarize this bit, you got to know your customer. I think that's the bottom line here. And there's a lot of work you got to do to ensure that you know the customer. I think a lot of organizations are crippled by legacy processes, people, the lack of cross-functional kind of working to be able to share information between the team that look after the technology versus those that actually look after the customer experience. And coming from a technology background historically, it was a lot simpler because back in the days, we would just present the solution to an organization. Here's a technology. You guys go and work out how to configure your IVRs and how you want to design it. That's your problem. But the world's changing now. I think even as a technology vendor, we can't get away with, here's a technology, go and work it out. We've got to sit down together to ensure that the technology is genuinely meeting the needs of the business. So yeah, it's like I said, it's an exciting time at the moment, completely on point in terms of where organizations are. Great to see, some of the work that you're doing. Where I'd like to kind of conclude today's session is I'd love for you to share a memorable customer experience that you've had. Could be something recent, could be something that's happened a long time ago. We hear a lot about how bad customer experience is out there. Like, all the stats, the analysts tell us we're on a downward spiral when it comes to delivering great experience. But I mean, yeah, if you have an example, I'd love for you to share it.
I think good examples are a lot harder to find than bad examples, which is incredibly unfortunate and the reason for VOS existing. But for me, prevention is the best cure, essentially. So at the moment, what we're working with a lot of the time is we're responding and reacting to what's going on. We're not getting ahead of ourselves to prevent things from happening in the first place. That's one of the values of conversational AI, is that you're having conversations with customers at scale every day. You're able to get and generate data from them conversations that will give you an insight into your business that you can then use to then mitigate the need for them to have the contact in the first place. As crazy as it seems, I don't want people to use any of our AI solutions. They're there because they are a last resort when something goes wrong. Often, especially in the customer support setting, maybe it's different on the sales side. You might want people to adopt it, but on the support side, you actually don't want people to use it. You don't want people to contact you. So the best cure is prevention. So businesses need to start getting themselves into a place where they're not reacting; they're instead being proactive first of all, and then preventing second of all, or preventing first and proactive being second. So a really great example of that was Delta Airlines. There's many things wrong with Delta Airlines, but this particular use case was great. I was in Washington, and I was flying from Washington to New York, transferring from internal transfer, and then flying out back to Manchester. And I got to Washington, got checked in, sat down, went and grabbed something to eat, and I had about half an hour to kill. Got up to see the board to see what was going on with the flight. Flight was delayed because there was thunderstorms over New York, so the flight wouldn't take off in Washington because it couldn't land in New York. So I thought, okay, went back down, sat down. Half an hour later, went up, another delay. I thought, oh, brilliant, what's going on here? And then literally 15 minutes after, I had another look and it said cancelled. And I thought, oh my God, what do I do now? Like, I've missed my flight now. My New York flight I've missed. So what do? I went and sat down, pulled my phone out to go onto the Delta app to figure out what I do. And I had a text message. And I clicked on a text message and it said, we're really sorry, your flights have to be cancelled because of thunderstorms or whatever. We've rebooked you onto the next available flight out of Washington tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. All the details will be in the app. I opened the app. All of a sudden, I've got a new ticket for a new flight the next day. So that's the prevention is the best cure. So otherwise, if they didn't do that, I would have been on the phone. I've been, what's going on? What's happening? I'm now disgruntled. I'm not happy because first of all, I've waited for 20 minutes and now the next person who's talking to me has dealt with 6 other customers on that same flight. So now they're losing a bit of patience and now the whole thing starts to spiral into a negative experience. Yeah. Instead, cut all of that out. Do the hard work behind the scenes to make it easy is the principle. And all of a sudden it was sorted before it even become an actual issue. And at that point, I'm on the next flight. I don't need to speak to anybody because I'm on the next flight. I've got the resolution. I can't control the weather, so that's that. Yeah,
exactly. You accept that. What I love about that, as you say, is the proactive nature of it. It's about anticipating what needs to happen based on certain situations. And obviously, cancel flights is a common issue. So it's great to see that Delta Airlines in this case have a process in place to kind of give you exactly what you did. They know you're going to call back, but it's amazing how many organizations get this wrong. It's there's obvious things that happen, like when I'm dealing with my car insurance or whatever it is. It surprises me that particularly insurance renewals, when most insurance companies know exactly what's going to come next. In terms of negotiating a better price, they know I'm going to go elsewhere to find a better deal. Like it's well understood. Yet I find there isn't a brand that I've engaged that can be more proactive perhaps appreciate a renewals coming in a few months' time. We've done a bit of a market research. We see that we're at this, just something very simple like that. I think it's just we're not, as you say, it's always difficult to think of some really good examples, but I do like that example. That's brilliant.
I had talking about car insurance about 2 weeks ago. I got a letter through the post. We don't receive many of those, so you notice them when they arrive. And I opened it up, and it was from the police. It was from Yorkshire County Council Police Service. I thought, what the hell have I done? Like, usually a speeding fine, it won't come from the police. I was like, what's going on? So I opened it up, and it said, you were caught driving on this road at this time, whenever it was, and your vehicle's not insured. Get it insured, or you'll be getting fined, or whatever it might be. So that was actually a good service from the police force, because they found me having an issue. They let me know and give me a warning. They didn't fine me for it, but I didn't actually know that my car wasn't insured.
Oh wow!
I genuinely didn't know about it. So it did me a favor, because I was like, shit, what? My car's not insured. What do you mean? And I had to go through all my emails to figure out if the insurance company ever contacted us.
That's right. Yeah.
Given that, imagine you're an insurance company, a customer's insurance is coming up for renewal. How many emails would you send them to remind them?
Yeah. Well,
how many? You'd send a few, wouldn't you?
Yeah, 5 at least.
Yeah. I got one email from the insurance company I could find. One email. I thought, no wonder. They could have texted me and said, as you said, we did a market analysis. The best possible option is with Sheila's Wheels for 30 quid a month. However, because you're a value customer, if you want to renew with us by just texting back yes, we'll do you it for £25 a month. How hard would that have been for them to do?
Exactly.
You know?
I think we're missing a trick here. Maybe we should go and approach every car insurance company with this idea.
I think so.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Listen, Kane, it's been a pleasure having you with me today, sharing some of your insights. We're just to kind of conclude, what's the best way to get in touch? The listeners out there, if they want a service from yourselves, what's the best way to get in touch?
I'm always active on LinkedIn. You can search for me, Kane Simms, KaneSimms, or my email is kane@vux.world. You check out vux.world. You know, we've got plenty of podcasts, plenty of articles, newsletters, you know, webinars we do every month. We do events of all different types. And then, as you mentioned, you know, the consultancy. We help current teams who've got services up and running, AI services up and running. We help them improve their processes and workflows and things like that, and help them perform. We work with some large financial institutions, helping them do exactly that. We also get utilized for actually just devising the strategies, designing, developing, implementing, and actually managing deployments as well. So whether you want to just take the problem off your plate and put it somewhere else, or whether you want to kind of help your team improve what they do, then always interested in chatting.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kane. And I do agree. I think in terms of the content that you produce, it's always regular, very frequent, and as I said, always on point. So I appreciate your time, and hopefully speak again soon.
Appreciate it. Cheers, Iqbal. Nice one.
Yes, thank you.
See you.